Hi, it's Emily, plant doctor here at Moana Nursery, and today I'm here at our Moana Lane store to talk a little bit about a really important topic, your houseplant soil, and why it's really important that you select a recipe that's going to work best for your plants. So why does soil matter so much for houseplants? Well, for one, it will determine a lot of factors that contribute to your overall plant's health. One being the amount of oxygen that's readily available to the roots, as different plants need different amounts of oxygen and gas exchange from each other. Additionally, it will also impact the nutrient and water availability, which are also both very important in contributing to the overall growth of your plant, and can sometimes, if they're not quite right, lead to stunted growth or issues like root rot. So it's really important to nail down what's going to be best for your plants at home. And today, I do have a couple of recipes that I'll share with you that are going to make it really easy. We have lots of awesome amendments here at Moana Nursery that you can use for your soils, as well as talking about what the best base to start with is. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the amendments that we use and that I'll be talking about throughout this video. It's really important to establish what each one does because they all have a unique function in your soil, and understanding what each one does will allow you to mix your own soil with confidence. So first up, I have pumice here. Pumice is really great for providing good drainage. This is great for plants that need a lot of oxygen to their roots or just want a really chunky medium to root out in. And I'll talk a little bit about plants that really like pumice a little bit later in the video. Next up, we have perlite. And perlite is a really common and important amendment because similarly to pumice, it will improve your drainage, but it's a lot lighter and a lot finer. So you can use it in larger quantities, and a lot of plants and soils will use this as one of their base ingredients. If you look at an ingredient list on a bag of soil, more often than not, you're going to find perlite on there because it's very accessible. I also have peat moss here today. There's a couple of mosses that I'll talk about, but peat moss is kind of like the inverse of pumice and perlite. This will actually hold on to extra moisture, so it's great for like forest floor plants that are going to love a lot of readily available moisture and anything that likes to get its feet a little bit wet. Now this one's my favorite one to work with. Orchid bark has just such a nice texture to it, and it's really good at allowing you to alter the amount of pore space in your soil. And pore space in your soil is really important because not only will it affect the ratio of water to oxygen in your soil after you water your plants, but it also allows space for chunkier roots. So if you have things like orchids, hence why it's called orchid bark, it's really great for those plants that have those thicker roots that need more space to navigate through the soil and develop a really strong anchored root system. Now I want to bring up maybe one of the most important elements of this video is your soil base. Now starting out with a soil base is really good because it gives you a nutrient base to work from. So our EB Stone indoor potting soil is formulated specifically for houseplants and general houseplant use. So it's your best jumping off point for most houseplants. It's got a really good balance that you can easily kind of tweak to your preferences by adding the amendments into it that you need. But this is great general purpose. If you don't know where to start with EB Stone. Now similarly, I have another base product here, and this is the Palm Citrus and Cactus Planting Mix by G&B Organics. This is a really good soil for anything that likes to dry out. So think your cactus, your succulents, those are going to be great for this soil. There's several different kinds of moss other than peat moss that are really good for your soil as well. Green moss, Spanish moss, sphagnum moss, these are all common soil amendments that you can use to not only improve your pore space like orchid bark does, but it will actually hold on to more moisture. So if you need something that's going to have a really nice loose texture for your roots, but not lose out all the water, moss is going to be where it's at for you. So what I have here is actually our house orchid blend. And what I want to point out in this blend are these little fine pieces of horticultural grade charcoal. Now, horticultural charcoal is one of the most underrated amendments in my opinion, because not only does it have that nice chunk to it, so it's really good for those bigger root systems, but it actually has really good beneficial properties to getting rid of odors in your plants, and also preventing buildups of harmful molds and bacteria due to the antimicrobial properties. So it's really good at balancing out your soil's microbiome and preventing any stink from growing, which if you've ever done a terrarium, you know it gets a little nasty in there sometimes. So always put in some charcoal. The last amendment I want to talk about is horticultural sand. Now, this isn't just your normal playground sand. This is sand that has been made sure to be clean and ready to use for your houseplants. Now, sand is one of the best ingredients that you can add for soils that need to be really nice and gritty. So things like palms will like a lot of sand, and so will your cacti and succulents. Anything that you can think of that needs a little bit of breathing room and needs really good drainage, it's going to need some sand in the soil. Now let's dive into some of the soil recipes that I have prepared. It's really important to kind of group plants together by different needs as far as watering, pore space, and oxygen needed to the roots. So I've kind of broken this down into simple categories that'll make it really easy for you to determine what's going to be best for your houseplants. First up, I have a tropical aroid mix recipe. Now this is going to be 2 parts of our EB stone, 1 part orchid bark, and 1 part perlite. This is going to be a really good all-purpose soil recipe that's going to do really well for a lot of your aroids. Now, what are aroids? This is your monsteras, your philodendrons, anthuriums, ZZ plants will like this mix. Any plant that's going to have those really thick roots that need readily draining soil is going to love this tropical aroid mix. So next up, speaking of that house orchid bark, we do have a really good recipe for your orchids and your other epiphytic plants. Now this would be 2 parts of the orchid bark, 1 part perlite, and 1 part horticultural charcoal. Now notice, unlike a lot of the recipes that I'm going to go through, there is no actual soil in this blend. This is super duper important because in nature, epiphytes like orchids and bromeliads actually don't grow in soil. They will grow on the sides of trees. That's typically very mossy. So you can also add some moss into your mix if you notice it's a little bit too dry, but make sure if you're mixing that orchid bark that you do it outside or in a really nicely ventilated area because that stuff is dusty. So sometimes you can wet it down a little bit to decrease the dust if you're indoors, but it's good to do it outdoors or make sure that you got a window open, a door open, something so you're not breathing in all of that charcoal and perlite dust because that is no fun. I also have another common mix that you're going to see quite a lot is, I call it the rainforest floor mix. So this is great for things like your alocasias, peace lilies, anything that's going to be shrubby and really like to hold on to its moisture. These are plants that are not going to want to dry out. So the best mix for those is going to be 2 parts EB stone, 1 part, you can use the peat moss or cocoa coir, and then 1 part perlite. You still want to make sure that there's some perlite in there just so that it's draining. You know, you don't want to make it a swamp in there for your plant's roots, but it is going to be important to make sure that you have enough of that peat moss in there that's going to hold on to the moisture so that your roots have a lot of water to pull from when they need it. Next up, I have another specialty blend. I call it my carnivorous mix. Now this is going to be great for any of your carnivorous plants, your pitchers, your sundews, your butterworts, your Venus flytraps. Now this is also, importantly, another one of those blends that does not use any soil because these plants in nature are bog plants and a lot of soils, potting soils, will come with nutrients added in. And it's really crucial that you don't pot them up with one of these because that nutrient will actually lead to root desiccation and ultimately plant failure. So the best mix for your carnivorous plants is going to be 2 parts peat moss, 1 part sphagnum moss or green moss, one of those long fibered mosses, and then 1 part horticultural sand. That's going to be the best mix of both water retention because they like that consistent moisture, but also that sand gives them a little bit of grit to anchor their really fine roots into. Next up, another common soil recipe that you're going to need, especially if you like those cacti and succulents, is a cacti and succulent mix. So rather than using the EB stone as your base, you're going to use 2 parts of the GMB palm, citrus, and cactus mix. This one's a little bit grittier, has a little bit less nutrient peat moss in it, so it's going to be really good to drain out those plants with. You're also going to add in 1 part horticultural sand and 1 part either pumice or lava rock. This is going to create a really nice kind of rocky mix that's going to be ideal for your cacti and succulents, because the #1 way you can kill those is by too much water. And the best way to prevent overwatering is getting your soil right the first time. Now, for some of your larger houseplants, like your ficuses and your palms, I do have a mix that's going to provide a little bit more anchorage. So this is ideal for ficuses and palms. Call it, amazingly, the ficus and palm mix. This is going to be 2 parts of your EB stone, 1 part of pumice, and the other part of lava rock. Or you can also substitute orchid bark if you prefer that. But the goal of this mix is to provide a really well draining soil. These plants don't like to sit in water. Ideally, you want to hit about that watering once a week. And so this blend is going to ensure that even though you have a lot of soil or a large root system, that it's still draining really well. So this is really good for those plants that are going to get big and that need a lot of root space. The last recipe that I'll share with you today, I call it the African violet mix. But this is great for not just African violets, but really any blooming houseplants. It's really good for Hoyas and also good for things like your Streptocarpus or your Apiscias. Anything that's going to have a nice flower is going to like this mix. So you're going to want to use 1 part EB stone, 1 part peat or cocoa coir, and then 1 part perlite. So these are going to be the best for flowers because flowers need kind of a finicky balance. You know, they don't like to be too wet and they don't like to be too dry. So having that mix is going to ensure that having equal parts is going to allow you to have consistent watering without getting too wet, too dry, and also support those finer roots that are really good for those smaller plants. So that's going to be the best for your African violets and other blooming plants. So to close this all out, why does soil really matter? We talked about it a little bit before, but maybe the most important part is the preventative care that you are giving to your houseplants. Understanding what they need in their native habitats will give you the best leg up in preventing pests, diseases, and things like root rot, which can all be really hard to treat once they've set in. So starting with a great soil base is going to be the best way to ultimately thank your houseplants for looking big and beautiful and lush. Now, one of the great things about all 3 of our stores is that we each have our own repotting bench. The repotting bench is amazing. If you haven't used it yet, you've got to use it for your houseplants. You can either buy a plant here and pots and any accessories that you like and pot it up using the repotting bench, or you can even bring in your houseplants from home. Because a lot of times, you know, I don't want to make a mess on my carpet. So it's easier if you want to bring them in, you can show them to a plant doctor, you know, because we'll check them for pests or anything before we bring them into the greenhouse. But then you are welcome to use our repotting bench. If you do it yourself, materials are free of cost. If you want one of our experts to pot it up for you, we're happy to do that for you for a repotting fee. But definitely check that out. If you are due for a repot, which we recommend to repot or change out your soil every other year about, sometimes once every 3 years for your really mature plants. But if you're due for a repot, come check out our repotting bench because it will be a game changer for you and your houseplants. Thank you all so much for watching. And again, if you ever need expert advice or help, any of our teammates at all 3 of our Moana Nursery locations are happy to help.